It's really great to be here today because I think all of the ingredients for the metropolitan revolution are here in this room. The message of the metropolitan revolution is very simple. In the face of federal dysfunction and drift, cities and metropolitan areas and the amazing networks of people who govern them and work in them and support them are stepping up to address some of our most important challenges. I want to talk a little bit today about why this work matters so much in the broadest context. We're facing a pivotal decade in the United States. We need about 10 million more jobs in this country to replace the jobs we lost during the recession and to keep up with just, general population growth and labor market dynamics. We also need better jobs in this country to address the troubling decades-long growth in inequality. In fact, between 2000 and 2011, the number of poor or near-poor people in the United States grew from 81 million to about 107 million people. The mayor previously talked about how the role of government is to support expanding human capacity, and one of the ways you do that is by supporting people in meaningful and sustainable work. So in the wake of the Great Recession, it's become clear that we need a new economic model in this country. Our pre-recession economy was built on debt and consumption. We need a new economic model that's derived more from production and exports, research and development, and on opportunity rather than enrichment of the top 1% of earners. Now, even before the toxic drama that refuses to end in Washington, D.C., it became clear that metros are the ones leading this charge. The federal government is really not able to step up and create the kind of changed economy that we need in this country. The predicament is not just about partisanship, it's actually almost a math problem. In the coming years, mandatory spending on entitlement programs mostly, it's going to take up an ever larger share of the federal budget. And that's going to crowd out spending on everything else, including a lot of the human services programs that are so important to, again, human flourishing and directing this kind of economy when you think about what people need to do to get to work. So the metropolitan revolution means that the smart people here in this room and the people who I'm honored to share the stage with are not waiting for Washington. They're stepping up and doing the hard work to grow their economies and make their places more prosperous. Now, you're all here in this room because you believe in the power of metropolitan areas, and that's founded on a lot of that's founded on fact. Metros take up about 12% of the land area in this country, but they're home to about 2/3 of our population, and they're responsible for about 75% of the GDP in this country. If you look at the factors that drive economic growth, metros punch way above their weight. They're 75, 85, 90, 95% of the assets that really matter for making change in the economy. So, of course, when it comes to reorienting our economy, metros are the logical place to start. Here's how we frame the issue for our metropolitan area partners when we think about how to move the economy from what it was to what it needs to be. I'm about to show you an animation from our iPad app. It's called the Metropolitan Revolution. It's free, and I hope you all take the opportunity to download it, but not, during the panel.
For decades, the United States built its economy on debt and consumption. For cities, this meant throwing public money at sports arenas and stealing businesses from their neighbors with tax breaks. But what about after the game? You can't build an economy around beer and hot dogs. And what happens when the businesses you stole leave for a better deal somewhere else? The Great Recession was a wake-up call. We forgot the fundamentals. Productive and innovative growth drive consumption, not the other way around. Smart metro leaders are going back to basics, investing in infrastructure, making manufacturing a priority again, connecting small businesses with investors in new markets, helping workers get the skills they need. If metros get the basics right, the beer and hot dogs will follow.
We perhaps should have changed that to bourbon and barbecue in honor of the mayor of Louisville. We'll try and get that in the next round. So my co-author Bruce Katz and I, when we were researching our book, The Metropolitan Revolution, we had the honor of doing kind of deep dives in several metropolitan areas around the country that we think are exemplifying the metropolitan revolution and really going back to basics in the important ways. Denver and Los Angeles are investing in state-of-the-art transit systems. Cleveland and Northeast Ohio are making manufacturing a priority again. New York City is trying to marry its existing industries with technology. Portland is linking small businesses with new markets and global cities. Houston is helping immigrants become entrepreneurs. And Detroit, even Detroit, is part of the metropolitan revolution as it reinvents its downtown and midtown to become an innovation district. It's almost as if these places were working off the slide deck this morning that Nigel Jacobs used. They're collaborating deeply, and they're growing their networks. So one example I'm going to talk about really quickly today is Northeast Ohio. This region's major metropolitan areas were hit very hard by deindustrialization. So to turn the economy around, a group of philanthropies got together and created something called the Fund for Our Economic Future. Over the last 9 years, the fund has provided guidance and financial support for efforts to connect entrepreneurs and inventors, customers and suppliers, and workers and jobs. Northeast Ohio is still not where it needs to be in terms of competitiveness, but over the last 9 years, the fund's efforts have helped to create about 10,500 jobs, about $333 million in payroll, and almost $2 billion of investments in the region. And more than half of these gains have come in the last 3 years. Next, you're going to see a quick video clip of Brad Whitehead, who's the head of Fund for Our Economic Future, explaining why it was so important that networks took on this task.
It doesn't exist anymore where somebody sits up on the top of the mountain and tells everybody what to do. Any one of us alone is not significant enough to make a difference on a global stage. But when we come together as communities that didn't used to come together and work at this metropolitan level, we can roar with the best of the lions. And I think we're starting to see that, and we're starting to become believers, and we see more and more people joining the revolution.
Now, as Mayor Fisher and Mayor Pete, I'm sure will both say, any metropolitan area in the country, not just the 7 that we picked out in our book, has the capacity to join the revolution. All of you can also think of examples of places that are part of this wave of innovation. The premise of the metropolitan revolution is that any place has what it takes to get started. And here are the 3 elements that we've identified in the places that we've worked as key to creating a metropolitan revolution in your own place. First, and most importantly, and again, this won't come as a surprise to anybody, but it's so fundamental it's worth repeating, draw on the value of networks. Metropolitan areas aren't governments, right? There's no overarching government that's taking in all the different jurisdictions in a metro. For a long time, people in the urban studies field thought that this was a disaster and that we needed more metropolitan governments. But we're realizing that the challenge with governments, the federal government, state governments, is that they tend to operate in silos. Metropolitan areas, by contrast, because there's no pre-existing structure, they tend to operate less formally through networks. In metropolitan networks, you have a wide range of leaders. In some places, it's your mayor and your elected leaders that are really sort of taking the ball and running with it. But in places like Detroit, or in other places where the local government is sort of either not paying attention or bogged down in some other challenges, you've got business groups and CEOs. In other places, you've got philanthropies or other nonprofit organizations that are taking the lead. So that's a huge element of metropolitan success. The second element is draw on this network to set a vision. This vision needs to be grounded in data. I get so upset when I go into places and I hear them say, we need to be the next Austin, Silicon Valley, flavor of the month. Austin is already Austin. Silicon Valley is already Silicon Valley. Places need to use data to become the best place that they can be, drawing on their own strengths. And that's one of the great things about what Code for America does, is it increases the appreciation for data so that places are really able to know more about themselves. Again, what makes Pittsburgh great is different from what makes Phoenix great. Denver is different from Dayton. Every place has to be, again, the best version of itself. Once you've got that vision, the important thing is to find your game changer. By game changer, we're talking about something that is going to redefine what your city or what your metropolitan area is capable of. Why do people have to be in your place in particular to achieve what they want? That's not going to be done through copycat. That's going to be done through something that your network and your data brings you. I'll close with one final animation that explains why we think all the places in the country can populate the map of game changers and what we hope that the metropolitan revolution can achieve. If you were able to hear the audio, there it is.
Governors and legislators run their states. The rest of us take our cues from them. While states and the federal government may be part of the Constitution, our population and economic power is actually concentrated in our metropolitan areas. It's time to rethink power in America. In this century, metros will lead and states and the federal government will follow. In cities and metros, public, private, and civic leaders are helping workers get the skills they need, investing in infrastructure and growing jobs through expanded trade and investment, the hard work necessary to renew our economy.
These are very serious times for our country, but just as the city is more than the city hall, our federal government is not the sum total of the United States. Our cities and metropolitan leaders are strong and resilient and rich in leadership, and that's why we think now is the time for the metropolitan revolution.